So for those of you who thought this was going to be a relaxing workshop where you just have to listen to me, you're half right, but you also have to do a little bit of work. So I'd like to ask you, without overthinking it, what are the first two words that pop into your head when you hear the term risk leader? This is your chance to scream at me and everyone else. Who wants to have a go? Laughter's a worrying thing if that pops into your head when you hear the term risk leader. Yay! But what, yeah, great. Facilitator? Trusted. What else, yeah? Champion, change. And that one's really powerful because it's fascinating for me, and for those of you who know me or we've had a bit of time, I started my career teaching martial arts and as a professional bodyguard. And now my businesses are very diverse, but our risk consulting business really focuses on cultural change. That's primarily what we do. And people look at us and they go, how do you go from being a bodyguard to doing cultural change? I said, well, we use a lot of force. It's easy, but the reality is, it's been a very hard lesson from me running my own businesses to consulting for clients, developing training programs, policies, procedures, implementing technology solutions, and then still getting frustrated that they don't work. To realizing that the fundamental glue, the piece we're missing most of the time, is that linkage of why we want people to do risk. And we want them to want to do it, not force them to do it. So in an era which is absolutely volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, for those of you who aren't familiar with VUCA, the world has changed and continues to change at a rate that we've never dealt with before. And for those of you who are kind of feeling frustrated, you're going, well, I've done everything I'm supposed to. If you look at textbook risk management, which I have no doubt all of you are experts in, well, what do? We want people to assess their risks. We want them to report on their risks. We want to be able to articulate those risks in a cohesive way so we can allocate our limited resources to get the risks that are unpalatable to as low as reasonably practicable. Everybody okay with that summary of risk management? If it's that simple, why is it so hard? If it's good, and we use a very simple ethical checklist. We say it's good for me, good for you, good for us, good for the greater good. Risk management should tick all of those boxes every day. And why is it so hard? So to start off with, and this is probably where I'll come down and start drawing badly, I just want to combine a little bit of academic theory. Who's familiar with the field of complexity science? Anyone here? Some of our graduates should hopefully be. I recently rewrote the Governance Institute of Australia's complexity science module. It's about a week long. I'm going to give you a crash course in about 5 minutes, because you're that smart. It's not that complicated. Right, so what we have to do is to actually understand the current operating context. And one of the big frustrations we see in a lot of the consulting work we do, and the students that come on our program, many of them are already chief risk officers or CEOs and highly experienced people, but they're still frustrated. And part of the challenge we've got is we're using old tools to solve new problems. And the old tools don't work for the current operating context the way they did even 10 or 15 years ago. So the concept of VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, it's a term so cool I wish I invented it, but I didn't. Originally, it was created by the US Army in the late 1990s. It was developed by the intelligence analyst divisions who were trying to come up with an explanation for why the second they stopped penning a report, their advice may not be accurate anymore. Because the second they stopped penning, something could happen on the other side of the world that would change the dynamic. The primary driver in the shift from an old operating paradigm to a new one was really the launch of the internet, and the globalization that we're all dealing with today. Never before in human history have we been so connected. So to start off and understand this, we start off and we look at the most basic of systems, which is referred to as a simple system, right? So the definition of a simple system is that it has a start point, it has an end point, and I'm able to easily map all the pieces in between. This was really where the first industrial revolution came into play. And we learned that if I organize and structure stuff systematically, it's much more effective to get stuff done. We were really good at this organization piece. And the more effective we got at this organization piece, the more we actually learned that the system is more important than the person. So if these are all people in the process, I should be able to pluck anyone out and put somebody else in if I've built a good system. And this is where modern management theory really started to evolve. We got so good at this, we actually got into what are called complicated systems. You thought I was joking about how bad my handwriting was, right? My wife always says the only reason I did a PhD is so I had an excuse for my bad handwriting. You might be right. So the reality is a complicated system is multiple simple systems, okay, that are packaged together. Right? And what makes it complicated is that unless you're an expert, you actually have no idea how these pieces fit together. And this is where we moved into the second and third industrial revolutions. We got so good at this, we actually had to develop specialists, we call them engineers, okay, to be able to decipher the complication. Okay, but the definition is pretty simple. We still have a start point. We still have an end point. We can still forecast the impact, okay, of something going wrong in any of the pieces, but it's pretty hard to do. So somebody who's not an expert wouldn't understand if this person who works in that conveyor belt broke, what the impact on that would be. An expert would. So this is where modern management theory took its next leap. We got into this concept of chain of command, span of control. We systemized these things. We got to the point that we realized, hold on a second, I need a few supervisors to look after these people. And then I need a manager to look after that person. And we started getting these triangles, this linear hierarchical approach that we have today. That's the modern norm. We got really good at it, and we still are really good at it. Yeah, the challenge is into the world we're living in today, and the world of complexity. Complexity is defined as I still have a start point, I still have an end point. I have no idea what the impact of all these pieces will actually be if something goes right or wrong. Thus, we actually have the term disruption, because we don't know what could work better or not. So the challenge we've got as risk professionals is the systematic processes we've learned for risk are amazing here. Yeah, we can put policies, procedures, systems, reporting, lead indicators, key risk indicators, all of those things that help us figure out what might go wrong there. And I'll just give you one example of the challenges of complexity. How many of you feel you adequately manage the risk of workplace violence well? Don't be shy if you reckon you do it. How many of you have workplace violence on your risk register? Okay. So how do we manage the risk? What do you currently do to make sure that that risk is as low as reasonably practicable? What do you do? Okay, so we try not to employ people that punch other people in the face when they're having a bad day. We try, okay? So there's a selection or vetting process up front. Yeah, whether it's effective or not, that depends on your organization. Then, I guarantee you almost every one of your organizations will have an HR system. And somewhere in that HR system, it will talk about a code of conduct or acceptable behavior. Okay, and it'll say something like bullying, harassment, etc. are not appropriate conduct. And if you behave that way, there are consequences. And those consequences could include us firing you or even criminal infringements. Yeah, so between those things, the way we hire, the way we select in our policies and procedures, those are amazingly effective tools that help us in this complicated operating space. They're good enough, but let's enter the world of complexity. Now, somehow, somebody's having a really bad day, they slip through the gaps, they're in our workplace, they get into an argument, and they just lose it and punch somebody in the face. Our system kicks in, okay? Because we know occasionally these anomalies will happen. And now we go into that response and recovery phase. The problem is now, in the complex world we live in, this person takes a selfie, okay, and their face looks all swollen. And even though you have a policy that says do not post anything to do with work or social media, which, by the way, if you have one of those, you're just kidding yourselves. Right? We have a whole generation that's grown up that habitually post on social media. You're putting a policy that tells them to break a habit with no incentive? That's not going to work. But now this person posts the picture, okay, and somebody else looks at it. Where do you work?
Do you really want to know?
Yes.
The ATO.
ATO. I love the ATO. I opened your security, integrity, and fraud awareness week last year. Okay, so the ATO is a great place to work. They take risks seriously. There's a lot of challenges in a complex operating environment. Okay, but now somebody posts a picture going, look what happened to me at the ATO. And somebody else looks at the picture and goes, oh, look at that. Federal government and the ATO are the most violent places to work in Australia. Look at what happened to me. And that goes viral. And now it's in the newspaper. And now it's trending and tweeting and it's all over the place. Off one incident. So all of a sudden we're dealing with insane reputational risk. Okay, we're dealing with potential hiring challenges for future staff. Okay, we're probably dealing with a denial of service attack on our internet even, where people are seeking revenge. Who would have forecast that of something that we could control? So it's just one example of the fact that the modern operating context now is complexity as a default setting. Because we've never before been in a situation where the lowest cog, this little individual here who technically didn't matter, could influence millions of people in a second on their phone. Okay, so the genie's literally out of the bottle, it's not going back in, the world has changed. Okay, we have to learn to get good at complexity. I like to mix stuff up. A lot of academics don't like the way we do what we do because I'm what you call an academic appropriator. If I see something's good in another field, I grab it and I bring it into what we do. So our grad cert is a combination of sports psychology, psychology, behavioral economics, and the list just goes on. But there's another theory that I want to superimpose with this, and that's the theory of chaos. So chaos theory is literally defined as I have no start point, I have no end point, and I don't know what to do. Anybody ever worked in a business like that? Some people are amazing in chaos. Right? Any of you are any of you those people who are really good at making sense out of chaos? So what do?
Start with the smallest thing you know how to do and then unravel from there.
Good man. So the first thing experts at dealing with chaos do is they create a start point. Even if it's the wrong start point or it's the wrong place, and even if it doesn't work, they've started. And then by chipping away at things, we eventually can identify an endpoint. And guess what? We're now starting to bring this into a complicated, or simple operating paradigm. So the challenge we've got is even though most of our operating systems have been built for this, our modern everyday world is actually that. We've got to be very careful though, because it's not an excuse to not have this stuff. Okay, and we've seen a few clients over the years who kind of go, oh, we're going to grab this complexity thing because it's an excuse for me not to have to do all the process and policies and systems. Yeah, we're in a very interesting time in our own evolution where we actually have to be good at both. You've got to have the process, policies and systems because in many cases there's legal requirements, there's corporate best practice requirements, and there could be significant negative consequences, for example, in the field of safety, if we don't have a proper system. So we can't just go, well, complexity and chaos systems are useless. They're not useless. They're just often not enough. But when they are, well, they enable us to keep going and to work in a scalable way. So it's that balance. Does that make sense? You guys are rock stars. 5 minutes of complexity and chaos theory. Well done. Right. So if we were so good at risk management, why is it that so many startup businesses fail? Any ideas? We've been doing modern risk management since the 1950s. Risk management's existed since the first human decided to get up, walk around and hunt or look after their family. So why is it that most businesses fail? Simon?
They can do their business, but they don't know how to connect their business to the outside world and sell it and be able to show people what they're doing.
That's certainly one of the reasons. Georgia? Actually, they very often do. So entrepreneurs, having had a few really good business experiences and having had a few real failures, entrepreneurs, we tend to be risk takers. We love having a crack. The problem often is not really in terms of, can we do it, can't we do it, does the market want what we have, all of those things that entrepreneurial research shows us. The problem we've got is actually a positive problem. It's the problem of optimism bias. Okay? And we'll talk about biases a little bit later. And I say thank goodness for optimism bias. Because if we didn't have it, if I didn't think I'd be successful, we'd never have a startup. How many of you as risk leaders would advise somebody to set up a business when they've only got a 30% chance of being around after 10 years and being successful? Okay, you as the risk advisor, would you tell them to have a crack? Guaranteed not. You'd be stressing, going, those odds are too risky. Yeah, but on the other hand, right, if we don't have that, nothing works. How many of your businesses have the concept of, or the term innovation into your vision, your mission, or something like that? Anybody? Show of hands. Let's look around. So our businesses are forcing us to try and innovate. Okay, we're trying to throw optimism bias, but the problem is, it's really hard to innovate a simple and complicated system. It's impossible to innovate in a system of chaos because I have to be able to bring it back down. Yeah, what we have to do is understand complexity. And we'll spend a bit more time talking about that as we go.